Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 91 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. In today's episode, Leslie and I are talking about course notes. Why do we keep it all? And why do we think we will ever look back on those notes? Now, Leslie, some people might find this a strange topic for a podcast. So what do we mean with course notes? I mean, we had a whole discussion about what a course note is to start off with, didn't we?
Now, first things first, I think the reason why we decided to do a podcast on this is because we see the huge volumes of the kind of things that we're talking about. So when we say course notes, now we're well aware that different people around the world use different terminology. So let's be specific about the type of things that we mean. So we're talking about course notes that you might have made at school, GCSEs, O-levels, whatever the exams are in your country. Might be from college, might be from university, might be from professional qualifications that you did once you started working. It might be things like PowerPoint courses that you did, of course. It might be professional development. It might be PhDs. All of those things where you have handouts or notes or take notes or write essays. We tend to keep them in lever arch files or some other type of filing, box files maybe as well. And they hang around for donkey's years because we're not quite sure what to do with them.
You know what I was also thinking? Notes from conferences. I've been to a couple of conferences, or like it can be day conferences or several days of conference. I love writing stuff down. And then later you think, I've jotted all this stuff, wrote all this stuff down. What am I going to do with it now?
You see, it's interesting really because we have this debate all the time, don't we? Because I consider myself to be a kind of reactive person. And so I like to look at something that's already written down and then I'll react to it if that's, so that's why Ingrid prepares a lot of the stuff that we do. And then I add my bit later, don't I? So you come up with the core content and then I add my bit later because I'm not really a note taker. I don't write things down. And so at a conference, the reason why I'm saying this, because at a conference, I will scribble and doodle, but I won't make any notes that make any sense. I might take a few action points that I might come back to later, but in general, I wouldn't write copious amounts of notes because I know that I'm never going to come back to them. But if you're on a training course, you are encouraged to take notes. When we've been trainers, Ingrid, when we train other professional organisers, we encourage people to take their own notes, to write their own notes about their own situations. And so that's something that's actively encouraged, isn't it?
You know, Leslie, I am the note taker, I'm the list maker. So I do write copies. I have 12 A4 of notes that I take at a conference. And then I take a highlighter and I highlight the things that I want to take action on or that I want to investigate. I've become better over the years in not keeping it all, but we find it all the time, don't we, in our clients' houses? We're like, oh, what is all this paperwork? And we're like, kind of dig a bit deeper and we realize, oh, it's not financial paperwork or bills or memorabilia, which is paperwork, or letters or kind of cards. And then we find out it's all this stuff they've kept from work or college or uni, or all the things you've said. And it is boxes and boxes of stuff, these plastic wallets with these press-on kind of closure things or with a wire around it, all of the things. And you're like, yeah, I went to a day course here and I did a training there and I took notes here. And you're like, what have you ever done with it?
And I think the important thing about all this is that every situation is going to be completely different. But what you need here is we need to be realistic and honest with ourselves. Now, we talk about realism and honesty all the time, don't we? Where did that fit into our life? Are we ever going to return to it? Is it practical or is it sentimental? Is it reference material? Are we going to come back to it? Are we not? Those are all the things that we're going to talk about. And every situation is different. So we're not here to say you have to ditch all your course notes. But what we're saying is for a lot of people, they are compromising valuable space by keeping things that they may not use. And so the whole idea of this is that we try and get quality over quantity.
So let's then dive into it. Why do we keep all this stuff?
There's so many emotions, aren't there? You know, I've talked already about sentimental. There's a sentimentality about things, particularly those things that we did at really key times in our life. And so school and university and college, those are very key, special times for a lot of people with really, really fond memories. And so there's an emotional attachment to something that you feel very proud of or happy to have gone through. So those are probably the things that are most difficult for people to declutter and have that level of honesty and realism about, aren't they?
I know it's like it's the times that have gone by, and when you maybe hold on to that paperwork, you reminisce about the things that you did and the people you hung out with and the stuff that you learned in school, and it's almost like, oh, you know, I remember those times, and maybe you think to yourself, if I hold on to my notes, it will make me think back to that special time in my life.
Exactly. So there's the fact of it being a really special time in your life, so that you've got a deep emotional connection to. And then there's also the fact that you may have moved heaven and earth to achieve that. So getting into school, passing your O-levels, GCSE, whatever your exams were, getting into university, getting a job where you went on that training course. These are big deals and things that we worked towards for so long. So that's not something, and that's not an emotion, that's not a connection that we're going to get rid of lightly, is it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are also exactly what you're saying, Lucy, proud of that work. Look at what I've accomplished. Maybe they decided to do a university course that involved so many hours of studying and learning and digging deep and being in the library till deep in the night to finish that project and to get all that knowledge in your head. And you're like, you know what? I'm so proud of those hours and that determination of concluding this project. That is why I'm hanging on to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting actually, because as you know, Ingrid, I am tackling my own sentimental things at the moment. So just to give you an idea, I have kept sentimental things in 2 or 3 boxes over the years that I haven't really. I have visited them because I moved abroad a couple of times, and so I have called them over the years, but I probably haven't looked at them for a good, I'm going to say 15 years. So I have become better at what I keep, I think, over the years because of the job that I do. So I'm going back to a time when decluttering wasn't a thing in my brain. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't that kind of decluttering person that was thinking about these things in the way that I do now that I'm a professional. So I actually, on Sunday, I went through a box that contained things mainly from me being age 17 to 26. Now, it was quite the box with all kinds of things, because that takes me into marriage, engagement, university, school, my first child. So that was a big box of a very key time in my life. But the interesting thing that I found, and I had really no idea what I'd kept all those years ago, but what I found was that I kept, because as you know, Ingrid, I went to Holland. So I studied German and Dutch at university. I went to Holland for a year abroad. And so speaking Dutch was a big deal to me, and spending that time in Holland. And so the only university notes that I have found so far, now I'm not saying that they're not going to be in another box if I open it, but I think that was my kind of university box, was 3 a big assignments, so almost like a dissertation. And so I kept those 3, and that's, so they're probably, it was all handwritten. My kids were looking at it and they were like, oh my word, like you hand wrote 16 pages. I'm like, yes, hand wrote 16. There was no computers then. That just didn't happen. You had to handwrite it all. So I probably got about 40 pages of essay that I've kept from the Dutch part of my university. And I think that I will keep that going forward, because it did evoke that special memory, because it had my kind of Dutch lecturer writing on it. It had the mark, which to be fair wasn't great. I was like, really? That wasn't great. So there may be more things that come up, but that's the right kind of quantity for me, and that's what we're looking at. You know, that's not going to compromise my space, but it is going to evoke that happy memory, which it did when I looked at it on Sunday.
I'm the same as you, interestingly enough, Leslie. I think when I finished uni, I remember kind of going, yes, I am going to get rid of all this paper. And I actually 90% at the time, after when I got that paper and I got that diploma, I was like, this can all go. And 90% went into recycling at the time. Last January, I was sorting out my paperwork a little bit, streamlining it a little bit. And I came across a folder of kind of when I was young. I've got lever arch files, as you know. I have also kept my dissertation. But I wrote it in Amsterdam when we were living at the time in this tiny room with this tiny desk, with this computer, with this green screen, because we didn't have colored screens at the time. I think it's like WP Perfect or something called at the time, typing away on the computer going, oh, this is like my worst nightmare. I'm such a practical person and I just didn't enjoy, but I like seeing the end result of the work that I put in. And it's taking me back to the Hilton in Antwerp where I did my internship at the time. And I just thought, oh my gosh. And I remembered some people that I still remember names of people. I mean, names is like my worst nightmare, but there are still names of when I did my internship there that I remember. And I was like, wow, that was a year that I learned a lot. I learned a lot that year. So I've kept it too, but all my notes from school, no, that's all gone. But I'm still proud of the work. I'm glad I put the work in. I always had to work hard. I made a lot of notes because I was the one who had to work hard. My husband, on the other hand, he reads something once and then it will be in his brain forever. Well, I'm like, I have to reread about 5 times if I have to do this exam.
I think the interesting thing about all this, so just, you know, that was my experience at the weekend. I was looking at my own sentimental stuff, and also coincidentally this week, my daughter has just finished her final year at university. So she finished her dissertation and her final 2 assignments this week. The interesting thing now about students is they all take a picture with their dissertation when they've finished. Obviously for most kids, God bless them, they are normally at university, outside the university when they're taking the picture of the dissertation. Sadly, my daughter's in the garden here because her final year at university has been spent largely at home. But they've got that as their memory. So their memory is, here's me on a photo with my dissertation. So I don't doubt for 1 minute that dissertation over the years will probably go in the bin. Yeah. Because A, it'll be on a computer, and B, it will be on this photograph, and the memory is there. Here's me in front of university with the dissertation. But people of our generation didn't have that. We didn't take pictures of us doing our dissertations. So that's just not the way that we rolled. And so it's very different in terms of the way that we do things and the way that younger people do things now. But I think that it's really all about the passage of time. So for example, when you were that age, Ingrid, 21, 22, when you were finishing, you thought that at that time, you think your whole career is going to hinge on what you've done, in the same way that I thought my career was likely going to involve speaking German and Dutch. And so you think it's going to come in to your job and that you're going to need to refer back to it. And so at that moment in time, you keep hold of it because you feel like you're going to use it. Mm-hmm. And so then we move away from sentimental stuff, because of course these things are highly sentimental. Job notes, probably not quite so much, unless it was a job that you really liked. So the sentimentality really comes in to the school and university stuff more than anything else. Mm-hmm. But once you get into work, it's like, the practical reasons for keeping it. Am I going to refer back to this at any point? And that is really dependent on you and the way that you work. So you're saying, Ingrid, that you do refer back to some stuff. I know that I never would. But again, this is where the realism, the honesty kicks in. And you have to say, have I ever, or will I ever go back to a full lever arch file full of notes, probably 300 or 400 pieces of paper, to find what I need? Or would I go straight to Google?
Yeah, very much so. I think now what I've learned is to transfer my actions to a to-do list and not keep all the paperwork from the training course, but just keep a small selection and get rid of all the things that are not important. Because I mean, at conferences anyway, you get loads of other paperwork that you don't need. So I've become much, much better at that. And then taking the notes, taking a highlighter, okay, these are the actions that I want to do, and put those on a to-do list. and then that paperwork. So there's a much more a stream through a life cycle of the where the paperwork is going, instead of, okay, I'm going to keep this paperwork and I'm going to put it on my other paperwork of stuff that I'm never going to look at again.
I mean, it is hard because it's all about growth, isn't it, and professional development, and you maybe do want to return back to that, or you fully intend to return back to that. And so it might be that you do keep it for a year, but after a year has gone by, you really need to put a time scale on that and say, if I don't then revisit this or do something with this project that I intend to do something with, then I'm going to ditch it in 3 months, 6 months, 2 weeks, whatever that might be.
Yeah. I think a lot of people kept stuff in the past as well because they were maybe afraid that they couldn't find the information again. I know several of my clients say, well, I've written that down, but my memory isn't what it used to be. So I've written it down here and I'm keeping it because I'm afraid I can't find that information again. But I'm like, how likely are you to remember that you actually wrote down that information on that piece of paper? Some people have. I have seen somebody with a whole cupboard with 30 lever arch files with work notes, university notes, and school notes. How do you know where you need to start looking?
Because it's not effectively indexed. For the most part, it's just put into a lever arch file.
Yeah.
We've not got the slick categorization that we've got within Google. We know we can find 10 things, and it's probably any 10 things that you can find on Google is probably a damn sight better than anything that I've written myself when I was 21. I'm gonna lie, I'm sure people have got far better things to talk about than what I wrote down. So it's interesting, but it doesn't. But there's so many things wrapped up in it. This is why we wanted to talk about it. And people probably, it's interesting when we think about our podcast topics. I'm sure there are a lot of people who think, oh, I've not got a problem with that. And then when we start talking about, oh yeah, actually, I have got that, all those course notes from that conference that I attended 5 years ago, or I have got all my course notes from school off my A-levels or whatever that might be. And so this is tough, and this is probably one of the, it's up there in terms of sentimental, isn't it, Ingrid? People are probably more likely to discard children's artwork than they are their own university notes. That's what is that your experience as well? Not all of their children's artwork. But might find it easier
yeah, especially if it's like something like a master's or a PhD or something that they actually really, they're like, a year of my life was gone, Ingrid. That's in the year. That year is in this paperwork. So they really are incredibly connected to it. But I'm like you, Leslie. I'm like, I must have written stuff down in my 20s. I'm like, nobody needs to know this now. I don't even want to remember it myself.
Yeah, exactly. But how do we tackle it, and what do we do then? What would you, I know what I would do, and I know what I did on Sunday and what my thought process was for Sunday. So if we could give any tips, what would they be, Ingrid?
Yes, Leslie, I know this is going to be not an easy project to do. And I think what you said earlier, I would really look at quality. What's the quality? Look for the quality, not the quantity. Maybe it's the PhD paperwork you want to keep, or maybe only your dissertation, or only your project that you wrote about your internship that you have fond memories of, like the one I kept. Don't try and keep everything, because you're not going to never refer to it again. What's the point? We know, our dear friend Juliette admitted it ourselves in the podcast that she did about procrastination. She still has her unfinished PhD in her loft. And she's like, one day I will return to this. So Juliette, this is a shout out to you if you're listening. You need to really get on with that, because otherwise you need to declutter it.
Yeah, if we say that to Juliette, though, she'll put it in her diary, and she'll have that PhD finished by next year now. If we give her that challenge. But yeah, I think that's it. I think it's go through. It's something that you can only do on your own. So even as professional organisers, when we're working with people, that sort of stuff is kind of off limits for us, isn't it? So we definitely, there are certain things where we're like, you need to spend the time on your own going through this, enjoying it, looking at what it is, and so you feel comfortable with the decisions that you're making. But it's not something that anybody else can go through or can understand, because that's so personal to you. Work notes, university notes, and school notes are so personal. But enjoy it before you ditch it, is what I would say. Enjoy opening up that Lever Arch file. Say, oh, that was my A-level physics notes, because that would be very exciting to me. No, not really. But I'm sure it is to people who love physics. But then be realistic. Is that information ever going to be useful to you? And actually, is it taking up valuable space in your home that you could do with giving over to something else?
Yeah, and I think as well, realize in advance, this is not going to be a quick job. If you have a whole shelf full of lever arch files, this is not going to be let me sit down on a Saturday afternoon for an hour or so and kind of flick through it. I mean, it's probably going to take, depending on how sentimental you are about the paperwork, it's going to take a while. So give yourself that permission to spend the time on it, and be realistic as well about the time commitment that it requires from you. Maybe you'll find out after 10 minutes, you're like, wow, this is actually not going to take long, because actually I didn't even remember what was in here and I don't really care about it. But we know from experience that a lot of people get sucked into reminiscing and just kind of going back to the time when they did all that work. And you want to enjoy that and be grateful for it and be proud of it, and just go, you know what, that was maybe even sometimes feels like a lifetime ago, some of these times in our lives, doesn't it, Leslie?
Yeah, I know that when I was looking at my stuff on Sunday, but in some ways it feels like it was yesterday.
I know.
You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's so strange, isn't it? And particularly because my daughter is going through that. So the exact things that I was seeing, she's right in the heart of that at the moment. So I thought it was quite pertinent, really. So yeah, anyway, course notes. I haven't really got any, because I don't really write them anymore, because I know that I'm not going to do anything with them. But that's me coming from a place of realism about the way that I work, I think. Lots of scribbles. I scribble a lot. That's what I do. And then I just cross it. I like to cross everything out and tick things off. And I think at the moment, it's interesting actually, because Ingrid and I are doing a lot of training together at the moment. So what we are doing is going through the courses together, writing our own notes and our own action points, and then transferring them into a shared to-do list, aren't we?
Yeah, we kind of agree at the end of the training. We're like, okay, so what notes did you take and what action points? It's interesting as well that we've got, some of them, of course, are overlapping, but others are like, oh, I didn't even really write this down as a to-do, and you've written it down as a to-do. And some of the things I might have written down is like, we need to investigate this or look at this. You might not have written that to do. So I think that's very interesting. So yeah, we're going to put it in actually a digital to-do list nowadays. So before we talk about digital, Leslie, I just wanted to say, if you are struggling with paperwork at home and you've got a lot of these course notes and you've got a lot of this paperwork lying about, you must be feeling quite overwhelmed. So if you think to yourself, I want to tackle that, why don't you have a look at our membership at the Declutter Hub? Because we have a 5-day paperwork challenge in our membership. And besides that, we have courses and quick wins and a member forum and live Q&As. And we can help you sort out your clutter. So if you want to tackle some of this paperwork, have a look at members.declutterhub.com for more information.
I think we just lead people a little bit better. It's quite overwhelming to try and do it on your own. And the members area is there for somebody to be behind you and with you while you're doing it and to guide you through that process. And if you get stuck, that you don't just give up, that you say, I'm stuck here. I don't really know what to do next. What's your advice? And then Ingrid and I can advise you, and you can ask those questions in a Q&A. You can ask them in our forum. You can ask other members. So there's lots and lots of advice in there. So it's not just another course, it's the input from Ingrid and I that's important, and that's what the members area is all about.
Yes, definitely. And we love it, don't we, Leslie? We love giving advice to all of our members. So come and check it out, and have a look at members.declutterhub.com if you would like to have more information.
We were talking about digital to-do lists when Ingrid and we were talking about what we do with the courses and the way that we have been taking notes and writing actions down. So just in case anybody's interested, the to-do list productivity app that we use is Asana. We've recently switched over from Red Booth, which we also liked as well, but we find Asana is working better for us at the moment. So if you think, oh, I really want to go digital and I'm struggling, there is a free version of Asana that you can use. And that's what we're using at the moment. And it's really good, isn't it? It's intuitive. It's quite nice to see things digitally if that's the way that you tend to work. It's also worth talking about the fact that, of course, a lot of these course notes, schoolwork, things like that, depending on the age you are also going to be digital.
Leslie, I remember those big, thin floppy disks. That's how old I am. Do you remember those? Those really square ones that you had to put in your computer and you could save stuff on it.
I know, exactly. Yeah. Floppy disk was something else. And floppy disk is something that we ditch a lot with clients, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to go back to them. And the thing is, if you've got something really, really vital on a floppy disk, you tend to know that you've got it and it's written on. So don't get too hooked up about those things on floppy disks. So digital decluttering of course notes is a completely separate topic completely that we need to talk about in a different podcast. But we just wanted to say, just because it's digital doesn't mean to say that it's not cluttering up your drives everywhere as well. So that's something else that you can do on a different day. So we would be bigger advocates at the moment, and we're trying to get you to look at the physical clutter at the moment, which is the actual papers and the lever arch files and the box files and random boxes of paperwork. That's what's important to us at the moment. But don't forget, some of that might be lurking in your hard drive somewhere.
Yeah, or maybe even on a USB stick or on a cloud somewhere. And maybe you realize, actually, I do have it. I printed it at the time because I felt I had to, but it is on my computer. It is on my USB stick. I'm going to put it all together in a cloud, thin it all out. And then for me, it's easier to let go of all that paperwork that's cluttering up my cupboards and that I'm never going to look at again. So if you know you've got a hard copy, so if you've got it digitally somewhere, if it's super important to you, of course, put it on your local computer and also put it in the cloud somewhere on an external hard drive. But if that makes you happy enough that you don't need that printed version, because it is the same as what's in the computer, so you can always retrieve that information if you need be, then the hard copy can go. And maybe it's easier to let it go if you know it's there.
So Ingrid, what I'm hoping is that when I open my other boxes of sentimental stuff that I don't find copious amounts of course notes. But to be fair, if I did find them, I'd be quite happy because that would be an easy thing to get rid of because I would just ditch the lot. I wouldn't necessarily take the time because I know that I've got the important bits already that I want. So sometimes it can be easy because you can get rid of a whole lever arch file in one go. So it's a lot of paperwork that you can get rid of all at once. Whereas with domestic paperwork, you have to go through things one piece at a time. Course notes, you can think, I don't want anything from that year of university, and you can ditch it all together, which sometimes is easy. So it doesn't have to take forever, but it can do if you're weighed down a little bit by the sentiment of it all. So a little project for the weekend, Ingrid, what do you think?
Well, make that a big project, Leslie. This is not a little project. I bet you there's going to be people who are listening to this going, oh no. No, not again something else that they found. Have they looked in my house? Do I know that I have this? It's so funny. Some of our members actually said, I was ignoring notebooks and things like that. And then you did a podcast and now I'm confronted with having to sort all this out. Have you actually looked in my house? Do you know that we've got this stuff? Yes, we do. We
see everything. We see everything, don't we, Ingrid?
Yes, Leslie, that's absolutely true. So listeners, do you think we have looked in your house as well? And are you now thinking to yourself, I have a project for myself this weekend and it might have a couple of weeks I need to be put aside to get this done. We really hope that our advice has helped you to think this through and you're going to actually, of course, take action. So thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate you're here. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with other people. Maybe your friends and family would love our show too. On our show notes page on our website, declutterhub.com, you can find sharing buttons. And if you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as @declutterhub. And we've got a lively, supportive Facebook group where we chat all things clutter. You can search for the Declutter Hub community. We'd love to see you there. Take a look at members.declutterhub.com to find out more about the membership. If you don't want to miss the next weekly episode, please subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and don't forget to tune in next week.